Hi, it's Colin Coward. I started The Volume to bring you some of the most authentic voices in sports. While you're here, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks.
The national championship game. I texted a friend who basically every team in the league sends a representative to the SEC championship game. Mainly because, and I guess this wasn't the SEC championship game, this was the national championship game, but it was the rematch of the SEC championship game. And it's because of the amount of NFL players in that game. And I think the difference in the SEC than all the other conferences is defense. Even Ohio State, right, who has consistently been the best team in the Big Ten for a decade, since Urban got there and up until this year when Michigan beat them. They dominated on defense, right? That was their point of difference. Defense, physicality. I talked to Dante Whitner on my other podcast last week, and it was all about defense. And you look at that game, and I said, who would you want on Georgia? And my buddy's like, we don't have enough picks to take every guy I want. Every guy in their front seven, every guy in Georgia's front seven is an immediate NFL starter. Did you see the talent on Alabama up front? Will Anderson would be the number 1 overall pick, number 31, in this year's draft. It would be a no-brainer, period, point blank, end of story. He would go number 1. You know the problem? He's not eligible for the draft. He's a true sophomore. The talent in that game on defense was stunning. The difference in the game tonight was wide receiver play. And the irony is, Bama, who just produced 4 guys who went in the top 15 of the last 2 drafts in Ruggs, Judy, Waddle, and Devontae Smith. Those guys were difference makers, and they didn't have that tonight. Now, Mechie tore his ACL a couple weeks ago. Jamison Williams, I think, tore his ACL tonight. You heard Saban talking to Kirby. But, like, the defense, the hitting, the physicality, like, that is the difference in the 2 conferences. This isn't a complicated formula here. It's why us in the Pac-12, we don't belong and we can't hang right now. We are not physical enough. We do not have the NFL bodies up front. Because when you can set the tone up front, it throws off your entire team. I can rush the passer. I can open field tackle. That looked like an NFL game. And Kirby Smart has been a star in coaching now for years. He has been at Georgia, taken them to the playoffs several times. They win the SEC East every single year. He's one of the highest paid coaches in the league or in the country. Georgia has been either 1, 2, or 3 recruiting every single year. He is elite. The only thing he could not do was beat Nick Saban. That was the only thing. And I was thinking back, like, if Phil Mickelson hadn't played in Tiger Woods' era, maybe he has 10 majors. If Peyton Manning hadn't had to go up against Tom Brady for years, maybe he has 4 Super Bowls. But sometimes you run up against the GOAT in your sport. But when you beat the GOAT in your sport, you become a legend. Part of the reason Dabo went up a notch and is considered, behind Saban, the best college football coach over the last decade, him, Urban, and Saban, is because he beat Saban twice in the Natty for all the marbles. Sports, there's a at the end of every game, we know a winner and a loser. Some games mean more. You know, in the NBA, no one gives a shit about a game in early January. Literally no one cares. In baseball, I don't know. It's crazy that sports talk radio for so long made so much money off taking baseball. It shows you how much people cared about random baseball games in June. And don't get me wrong, I watched some of these random baseball games. But the average fan, the casual fan, who is how you kind of make your money in the business, you know, it's just casually coming in and out. Even in football, like a regular season game in October means something. But it's nothing like what we saw this last weekend in the NFL. These playoff games are a completely different level than the games, even in college football, where your margin for error, because you can really only lose 1 game. But Kirby Smart tonight, his life changed forever. He will always be viewed now as a guy that beat Nick Saban in the national championship. No one will talk about how Nick Saban lost his best, arguably his second best player on his team, star wide receiver, to an injured knee. No one will, or that his other receiver went out several weeks ago. No one cares. We just remember the final score and who won, maybe not even the final score, who won the game. It's part of the reason Eli and Tom Coughlin became such legends. Their 2 Super Bowl victories were against Belichick and Brady. And listen, Kirby Smart was eventually going to win a championship. And I was thinking about this. part of success, what makes success fun, is failing and having struggles and being disappointed. And whatever in any industry you do is kind of like getting hit in the teeth, being humbled. Like anyone worth their salt wants to accomplish, wants to achieve, works really hard at these things. But sometimes early in our career, middle of our career, late in our career, we fail. Failing is healthy. And that guy kept driving him. He kept working. He kept grinding. And that guy built a team that looked like a powerhouse, like a peak Alabama team. That defense has probably 8 NFL starters in 2022. Like, those guys will all get drafted and start on defense next season. Now, their quarterback looks like he'd be your neighbor in college, right? You drink some beers with him at a fraternity. It's pretty crazy. I'd say both those quarterbacks, obviously Bryce Young is a massive recruit, but the players in that game were massive. Every human being physically, offensive line, defensive line, tight ends, running backs. I mean, Georgia's running back is Dalvin Cook's brother. One of the best running back in the NFL, his brother. What are the chances that guy's good? Pretty high. And yet the two quarterbacks look tiny. They both looked right around 6 feet tall and 190 pounds. But I'll give Stetson Bennett credit on this. He threw a beautiful deep ball today. He hit several deep passes. Where on the flip side, Bryce Young was let down several times by drop passes by wide receivers I've never really heard of. And that will probably become good players. But we're on nowhere near the level of the previous guys. And Saban said it at halftime. Some of these young guys with our injuries are going to need to step up. This is their first action. Let's rock and roll. Let's go. And they couldn't. And that's human nature. That happens a lot, against Nick, not usually for Nick. And you can see, tonight wasn't going to make or break Nick's legacy. He's got 7 national championships. It was gonna get to the point like, what's the point of all this? But every once in a while you lose if you're him. It kind of keeps you going. It's easy to be motivated this offseason to be like, I don't want to lose that game. And like I say it all the time, and I've learned this. I would say it didn't feel lucky at the time, but when you fail, it sucks at the time. It really does. But when you look back a year later, 5 years later, you are grateful for that moment. And you can see it on Nick's face. I was told once by a guy that worked closely with Nick at Alabama. So the crazy part about Saban is he is way easier to deal with after losses. He's really the only guy in the building who is optimistic, who is upbeat. Where Nick is miserable is after wins. And Google his record. They win all the time. That's why he's talked about like this miserable guy. Because that's the only way to keep guys motivated. Because it's hard to stay locked in, especially for young kids and even college assistants, when you're kicking everyone's ass. But I bet his speech and his talk to the players after the game, that's when Saban's at his finest. But ultimately, as someone that had money on Alabama and just lost some cash, I'm happy for Kirby Smart because, the only way to truly become a legend in your sport is to win the big game. That's the whole point of all of this. As Bill Parcells said, that's why you lift all them damn weights. Obviously, coaches aren't lifting weights like players do, but that's why you spend all those hours in the film room. That's why you spend all those hours recruiting those kids. And Kirby Smart accomplished his ultimate goal. And I don't think it's crazy. This might be, kind of a watershed moment of a breakthrough. Is it crazy to think he's got a couple more natties in him? Because that program is going nowhere. NFL players are going to keep siphoning through there. His side of the conference isn't that great. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he gets another championship and gets another championship fast now. Thanks for watching 3 and Out. You can check out the podcast below in the description and make sure you subscribe right now to the Volumes YouTube channel.